Hey, what's up guys? Today I have a special video for you where I get to do some early access gameplay, review, and my overall thoughts on Linnea early before she's out. Just a bit before she's out, I know, but a lot of effort went into this because I put a lot of time to give you guys a big showcase, a rundown of what she does, and also my, honest and in-depth thoughts on her kit, place in the meta, value, and all of that in this video. So it's a pretty big one that I honestly could have split into two, but I'm condensing down to give you guys as much as I can before she's out, on top of following it up with a full dedicated guide shortly after her release. So stay tuned for that as well. Obviously, all the footage you're seeing from today is from the creator experience server, which I'm really grateful to have been a part of and get to play Linnea early. So a big thanks to them, and a reminder that everything you're seeing is subject to change for the official launch. Additionally, I was provided with a code to share with you guys for some Primogems and other stuff that I'll put in the description down below. With that said, let's get into the video. All right, so starting things off, before we get into a showcase of Linnea, I first want to give you a quick rundown on what she actually does. Well, Linnea is primarily going to be a lunar crystallize and geo, support, and sub DPS. She's a character who brings a lot of value in her kit that helps uplift existing geo carries, as well as just being pretty strong on her own. In fact, her kit gives you the following. Firstly, she will enable lunar crystallize and increase its base damage, converting any hydro crystallize reactions into lunar crystallize, which will be a nice bonus amount of damage throughout your rotation, provided you have hydro and geo in your team, as I covered in some of my previous guide videos. Now, outside of that, Linnea will also give you geo res shred effectively all the time as long as her little friend Lumi is present. In fact, she will give you an unconditional 15% geo res shred provided Lumi is present, with this res shred increasing to 30% if you are inside of Moon Sign Ascendant Gleam, meaning that you're running Linnea with at least one other Nodcry character. This will be the case in almost all of her best teams, so generally you'll get 30% geo res shred here, but even having 15% as a baseline is very nice. Outside of that, another buff Linnea has is through another passive that will give elemental mastery to your active character if they are a moon sign character, meaning if they're from Nodcry, based on Linnea's defense, and she's a defense scaler, so you'll have a lot of this, and the exact amount will vary based on your build, but it will typically be pretty sizable, like over 100 and under 200, usually between 120 and 170-ish, but depends on your set, stats, weapons, and all of that I'll cover in my guide, but generally just nice EM to your active character. And if your active character isn't a moon sign character, so they're not from Nodcry, and they probably can't make the best use out of EM, if that's the case, then Linnea herself will actually get the EM instead, which will increase her personal lunar crystallized damage, so that's also appreciated. Now, while I covered her passives and some of the buffs she gives you, that's not all. In fact, Linnea is also a healer, and through her elemental burst, she will give your team AoE healing. It's team-wide AoE healing, a big burst of it when you press it, and then smaller healing ticks to your active character only, once again scaling with Linnea's defense. The big burst of healing is pretty good, and the continuous healing helps as well, and just makes it to where you don't need another healer in your team, with this burst being something you can use optionally, basically whenever you need healing. It will also refresh the duration of Linnea's friend Lumi, which is the main part of her kit that we actually have yet to talk about. In fact, last but not least, we have Linnea's elemental skill, which is the main part of her kit. She summons her little friend Lumi, who, might I add, is adorable, and there's actually two ways of using this skill. Firstly, you can either tap the skill, summoning Lumi in what is called its super power form, where Lumi will continuously attack enemies, dealing AoE geo damage, and it will alternate between doing regular geo damage and lunar crystallized damage, provided that there are moon drifts nearby, which get summoned as you trigger lunar crystallize. So if you're lunar crystallizing, then Lumi can do so as well, seemingly doing a lunar crystallize hit and then a geo hit and then another geo hit, and repeating the process, but more info in my complete guide. Alternatively, you can also continuously tap Linnea's elemental skill instead to kind of feed Lumi these gemstones, after which Lumi will do one really big hit of AoE lunar crystallize reaction damage. This hit is quite considerable. It's the biggest single instance of damage in all of Linnea's kit. It's a really big front-loaded lunar crystallize hit that can help you finish off enemies. Now, the only drawback here is not only does it take a bit of time to charge up, although you do get increased interruption resistance as you do so, which is appreciated, but also afterwards, Lumi will enter her standard power form, which is not the same as the super power form we talked about earlier, and it will just do geo hits, not lunar crystallized ones, at a much slower interval. In fact, it does seem like you'll only get around 4 kind of double geo hits throughout the duration after the big lunar crystallized one, making it to where both ways of using her skill have different pros and cons. While I'll cover which you should use in my guide video, generally speaking, just tapping her skill will give you more lunar crystallized and geo hits, faster application, and more of an off-field presence, whereas continuously tapping her E will give you a bigger nuke, but much worse application afterwards. Both are viable, and I think tapping her skill will be generally the standard way to use her in lunar crystallized teams, but using the nuke skill can be better if you want front-loaded damage, you want to finish off an enemy, are running teams without good lunar crystallized uptime, or have good buffs to it. But basically there's situations for both, but tapping as of right now seems to be standard, but continuously tapping and doing a nuke is very satisfying and can also be quite good depending on the scenario and the team. And so yeah, Linnea just has good personal damage, good healing, and also great buffs to Geo through her res shred and even an elemental mastery buff as well, on top of also enabling lunar crystallize and just being great overall through all of those factors, and her considerable personal damage from off field, especially when you keep in mind that her own damage will benefit from her own res shred, so she's kind of buffing her own damage, so that's very nice. Also, while I rarely talk about exploration passives, Linnea has a really unique one added onto her charge attack that I wanted to mention. Number one, she can mine extremely efficiently, so goodbye Zhongli, and also she can capture wild animals like the Omni Ubiquity Net, which is really expensive, and as someone who collects animals in my teapot, this is kind of crazy. So obviously just quality of life things, not the biggest deal, but pretty cool, so I thought I should mention it. All right, so with that out of the way, before we get into a review on Linnea and a lot of my initial thoughts, I want to do a showcase of Linnea against a few different pieces of content, mainly Stygian Onslaught though, because it's the hardest endgame that really matters in order to progress your account and get all the rewards. So my Linnea right now is going to be on Slingshot in every clip, C0 on the best available free-to-play weapon, on the Obeyed set with a really good build and solid crit. Now keep in mind that the talent level of everyone you're seeing will be talent level 9, except for one clip where I specify it. All characters will be on 4 or 3-star weapons, C0 5 stars, and C6 4 stars, although Ilua I kept at C2 in order to show him off without, you know, having the whole C6. All right, so starting off with the showcase, we are inside of the Fearless difficulty 5 Stygian Onslaught, and for Dire, stay tuned for my main account clears that I'll do on release. Now, here we're fighting the new enemy, the Radiant Moongecko, where there's like a, Geo Shield. I'm sure you may have fought him by now, but there's that into a phase where you actually need healing, which is where Linnea comes in strong. Now, I want to say something that I think I mentioned earlier, but all the characters here are on 3 or 4-star weapons, Ilua being C2, and here you can see I just paused to showcase the mechanic of the boss. Here, he actually applied a debuff on us right now, where this little debuff where my cursor is means that I believe you can't crit until you heal it off. So we use Linnea's burst, which you don't actually need to use every rotation, just to heal us, cleanse that, and then I swapped to my other characters, swapped to my Zibai, and started dealing damage. My Zibai is on Harbinger of Dawn, so I want to make sure she stays healthy. And outside of that, it's basically just straightforward gameplay, brute forcing the Gecko, doing as much damage as I can. And Linnea is a perfect character for this specific enemy. Ideally, you want Geo against him to break that crystal at the start, and then healing helps to remove that really vicious debuff that he applies onto you. So Linnea is the perfect character to fight the Moongecko with. For some other teams, I did showcase it against the Frost Knight Hera, which is another Stygian Onslaught boss we'll get to, that also is, impactful to be able to clear, but additionally doesn't take as long. So I didn't want to make the showcase too long. And this boss has a lot of stalling, a lot of just annoying fight this Geo thing, cleanse my debuff. So Hera's a bit still a shilly boss, but a bit less annoying. So anyways, I cleared pretty fast with Zibai. And something I really wanted to mention here is that while Ilua at C6 is your best support, okay, I want to make that clear, at C2 or anything under C6, C6 Goro actually does seem to be stronger and the better and even comfier option, because he also, outside of just giving you buffs, gives you healing too. So yeah, keep in mind that it could have been a bit faster with him or with C6 Ilua, which I did not have activated. Just C2 to use Silken Moon Serenade efficiently. Next up, we're fighting the Moongecko again, not because I want to, because I find this enemy annoying, but because I thought it'd be good to showcase without Columbina. So we're using a C6 Ino instead, and you don't need constellations on her to be viable here at all, and there's even other options you can use. But yeah, I used Ino and Goro, and I'll touch on why Goro is so good a bit later. Here, I just wanted to re-emphasize that I'm using Goro kind of because number one, he's really good, and number two, as an alternative, like obviously if you have Ilua, he's usable here too. I just want to showcase it with a different 4-star. Both work depending on like constellation levels. And I guess what I want to mention, and probably will mention again later in the review, is that because all your characters are moon sign, if Ilua is in your team, no one can trigger the resonance of Ascendant Gleam. So that actually makes Goro stronger than you might expect and narrows the gap between a C6 Ilua and a C6 Goro, and makes a C6 Goro stronger than a unconstellated Ilua, generally speaking, on top of also giving you comfort. And for me here, like I used, as you can see, and I feel like I'm not talking about Linnea that much, mostly Zibai, but it's kind of, Zibai is the main carry you're going to be playing with her. Like Linnea is a support, so what you see is what you get. Here, I did decide to do a nuke burst of damage to help me clear faster. It actually did end up helping compared to my last clear, but some of it's just for fun. It is quite satisfying to see a big nuke, whereas generally in this team, or generally in, you know, most standard lunar crystallized teams, I just press the skill and then move on. But especially with like Goro buffs, it is nice to do the nuke if you want more front-loaded damage. Additionally, something you can do is actually, and I did another nuke to finish him off, so this is a perfect showcase of Linnea, one of her strengths, which is being able to modify your rotation and front load a bunch of damage if you want to. Now, looking at his HP bar, I didn't need to, but I mean, it's nice to just finish him off if you ever need a little bit of extra damage in a rotation. Additionally, what I wanted to mention, and I feel like I'm rushing to say these words, so I'll let the clip play and I'll keep going. For Linnea with Goro, something you can do is actually a kind of rotation where you swap into Goro twice, use his skill, then Linnea's nuke, and then swap back into him and use his burst to kind of maximize your buff uptime. But this is still something that I'm testing out to figure out if it's actually optimal or not. So kind of just experimental gameplay in the background you're seeing. Nothing too like perfect, but I did reset a few times and, you know, test around with things just to make sure the clears were pretty good. Here we're fighting the Frost Knight Hera with a C0R0, you know, all 5 stars, and a C6 Goro. And Columbina, if you're wondering, I didn't write her weapon down anywhere, but it's always been on prototype, on Favonius Codex. I might have used prototype Amber once or twice, but for Stygian, it was, I think, entirely just Favonius Codex, so always a 4-star weapon. And Hera is an enemy that I think is more fun to test against because it doesn't take as long to kill, and while the mechanic is kind of lunar shilly, it doesn't feel as restrictive, or no, maybe not. I mean, there's more ways to do it. Like on the live server, I did some stuff with a Noblesse Skirk to break the shield, but basically there's more teams you can use than just the Radiant Moon Gecko, at least seemingly. All right, so now we're gonna get into other geo carries. Mainly so far it's been Zibai. Here is going to be Navia against the Moon Gecko. Now, important thing to mention is that my Navia is actually on her signature weapon, Verdict, and this is the only time any character you're seeing is on a signature. And this is because to use older characters in content that has this much HP, sometimes it can help a lot to have it. Now, I did manage to clear difficulty 5 Frost Knight Hera with Navia with a 4-star weapon, but I wanted to do the Moon Gecko to show that it can be doable with some different carries, some older ones, if you have them properly built. And in Navia's case here, I did need to use her signature, but no other character was on a 5-star weapon. So whether or not it's needed, I guess, can depend on like your account, your builds, and what else you have. Like all my other characters are on 4 or 3-star weapons, but my Navia, at least, you know, from the early gameplay and builds that I had, did need to have Verdict to clear this. But maybe it's possible, it probably is, with like other weapons, if you have better investment and stuff. You know, again, none of my talents are crowned, stuff like that. But yeah, I ran Verdict, and I think this is more realistic anyways for what to expect, right? Like the builds are good but not absolutely perfect, and it went well. Like it took a lot longer than the Zibai team, and you know, I'm sure my rotations could have been optimized a bit more. I tried to play well, but you know, there's always better you can do. And I'm on like 220 ping, although I'm sure that didn't matter too much here, but it affects me mentally, I guess. So yeah, anyways, you know, we played Navia, C6 Aino, Columbina, and Linnea, and Navia works really well, or rather, Linnea works really well with Navia. Now, something I probably should have mentioned earlier, and you might be wondering, hey, why are you running Aino, right? Well, obviously, C6 Aino is great for lunar crystallized teams, but the more important reason is that typically I run Farina here, and against the Frost Knight Hera, which I cut out to save time, I did actually use Farina instead. That's like the standard option that I was playing, and in other teams you'll see her. But against the Moon Gecko, because he requires you to heal his debuff off, I found that my Farina, unless I like didn't press her E at the start, was draining so much of my HP that I couldn't instantly heal off and cleanse that sort of debuff, like remove it from me, and so it just was kind of problematic. So I didn't use Farina where I typically would. Other Hydro options like a Yelan or basically anyone would have worked too though. But yeah, that's just the team I decided to run with. And yeah, okay, excuse me getting knocked back there. I was gonna keep resetting and try to get a better clear, but this took already a while, and the boss is honestly quite annoying. So I just, you know, stuck with that one because it's just a proof of concept, right? Here we have a C0 R0 Ito against the Frost Knight Hera. Again, I didn't feel like doing the Moon Gecko. Probably would have needed to give him his signature or, you know, played perfectly, but we're using a C0 R0 Ito. He is on a Serpent Spine though, R5 Serpent Spine, but I couldn't really fully stack it up for a while. So yeah, there's that. But yeah, Serpent Spine Ito, obviously it'd be better if you have a signature. And we are playing a C6 Goro, Slingshot Linnea as always, fighting the Frost Knight Hera. And yeah, Ito is another character that I've been a bit rusty, or I was a bit rusty on, had to kind of relearn his combos. I think just to be safe, because I have to like dodge attacks to not get you know, absolutely interrupted during my normal attacks. Charge attacks are obviously fine though. I did miss probably, I think, one normal attack or one charge attack. Like I think I did N3 instead of N4. So again, there could be some slight optimizations. If you're an Itto main, keep that in mind. You could do a bit better, obviously. And our talents are, you know, once again, talent level 9. So always room for improvement from what you're seeing. But we did clear the difficulty 5 Frost Knight Hera with no problem at all. Outside of that, I guess I'll just let this play now. Yeah, we get a little nuke here just for fun. He kind of should have died here. I thought he would. That's why I did the nuke. I was like, can you die? But yeah, just wasting time for my Ushi to come back. Yeah, he was 1 HP for a while, so we definitely could have saved a lot of time if I reset. But again, the point isn't to compare like team times. It's just to show that the teams work. And then, yeah, basically just that. So here we're playing C6 Noelle, another Geo character that works, right? Older Geo carries like Noelle and even like Ningguang can work. But yeah, C6 Noelle with Farina and Columbina. And Noelle is on Slingshot once again. R5, sorry, what am I saying? Serpent Spine once again. Linnea on Slingshot, both R5. And obviously you can't pre-stack Serpent Spine in Stygian, so it's not as broken as it is in like Abyss. Keep that in mind, but it's still really good, especially with Noelle's shield. And here I'm just on field doing N4 combos on Noelle. I know that also like charge attacks are optimal for more healing, but I found I did clears with both normal attacks and charge attacks. I found that the normal attack one was better, but there might be some optimized Noelle combos like N2D or something. I'm not really deep in the Noelle theory crafting universe. I'm just doing a normal, you know, 4 normal attack string, dash canceling, playing Columbina, Linnea, and Farina, getting all these buffs, doing a bunch of lunar crystallized damage, and having my Noelle on field. Now, while Noelle is on field, she's mainly like a healer and Geo kind of, yeah, damage dealer slash applier, but like more of a driver than a carry, because it's also somewhat similar in the other teams you were seeing where both Itto and Navia do good damage, but a lot of your team's damage comes from Columbina and Linnea's lunar crystallizes from off field. Now with Noelle, sorry for like rewinding, her personal damage numbers are even smaller, and to the point where I did see some people running like Fav on her, but let's move past that. Basically, like, she's here to apply Geo, do some damage, and heal your whole team. And as you can see, the off-fielders' damage numbers are going to be a lot bigger. So this is something I want to highlight. Linnea and Columbina really can carry a team, right? Like, they do a lot of damage. Linnea especially, you can see, like, the big damage numbers from everyone. Like, they do a lot of damage, right? And you're getting lunar crystallized reactions. So Linnea is kind of an off-field carry almost. She's kind of like an in-between Inefa and Lauma as far as what her kit provides. It's not all personal damage, right? She also gives you Geo-Res Shred, Elemental Mastery to either your Moon Sign character or herself, you know, and healing. But yeah, she has a lot of personal damage as well. So do keep that in mind that in this team, even though Noelle is basically elevated to being able to be ran in a team that can clear difficulty 5 Frost Knight Hera, Linnea and Columbina obviously do a lot of your team's damage. And so, yeah, if you're a fan of older Geo units, Linnea is a great character for you if you're fine with her doing a lot of your damage as well, which, you know, I don't think is a problem, because that's how Genshin teams oftentimes work, especially as of late. Now, taking a break from Stygian, I wanted to show off just like a wheelchair team. Now, this is Columbina, Linnea, and Inefa, and you can run almost anyone in the last slot. Well, here, I just wanted to show like no other last slot against an overworld boss. The reason I didn't do a fearless Stygian clear is because this video is getting really long, and I have a guide to make too, and I didn't want to include way too much, but you can run this with Neuvillette. It's another one of his great teams. You can run Flynn's. Flynn's even works with Linnea as the last slot. Like, yeah, generally you'll play the 4-star character that is Sucrose there, but I mean, Linnea can work. Any Hydro on-fielder like Neuvillette or others can work, even with like Electro, Geo, whatever. You can just run an on-fielder with this team and it'll be fine. It's just an example of a wheelchair, even with just those 3, and then whoever you want on field. Next up, I'm showing Nefer Premium, and this is another example where Hera is a lot better of a matchup, right? Radiant Moongecko would be super annoying for this team that doesn't really apply Geo outside of Linnea, and we're showing Nefer with Linnea as the last slot. Now here, a Sucrose, who's a 4-star character, will generally be better for your DPS, although it's harder to use. Like, the rotation is a bit complicated if you want to get a swirl off on Sucrose, although Sucrose is kind of always good regardless. But if you want to trigger like Instructor, you need a proper and kind of difficult, at least to get used to, rotation, whereas Linnea is very straightforward and isn't too far behind in team DPS, making her a very viable last slot here. Now, as you'll see, you're not triggering a lot of lunar crystallizes. Like, the enemy is going to be Dendro because of the way your elemental application works, but because of that, you can do a nuke of damage on your Linnea. Just in general, you can triple tap E on Linnea because you're not going to get that many lunar crystallizes. Just get a big nuke of damage, give some elemental mastery to Nefer, and also provide you with healing if you need it, and that's already enough. On top of her, you know, like solid, just general damage that Linnea gives you is enough to make her a strong option as a last slot in a Nefer team. Now, again, I don't recommend pulling Linnea just for Nefer, okay? But if you have her and want to use her as a last slot, she works honestly surprisingly fine in a team like, or any team that has at least some like Lunar Crystallized with someone like Nefer or Flynn's. And here's an example with Nefer that worked really well. I also wanted to mention you can use her as a generic Geo, even in something like a Arlecchino team or with whoever in like double Geo, but she's basically just going to act like Chiori there and will have less synergy than any team that triggers at least some Lunar Crystallize and, you know, is an Ascendant Gleam, as is the case with Nefer or even Flynn's for that matter. But yeah, I did like her in this Nefer team. If you don't want to use Sucrose, or, you know, there are a bunch of other last slots you can use, but yeah, just her being another one is surprisingly fine. Last, I included a clip in the 412 of Spiral Abyss. Now here it's C2 Illawa, C0 Zibai, and a Slingshot Linnea once again, but keep in mind that you get Lunar Crystallized damage in this half of the Abyss, 75% damage bonus, I believe. 2 Lunar Crystallized, so keep in mind the damage numbers you're seeing will be bigger, but I did include this to show that in this type of content, Linnea will obviously be, you know, broken, and I wanted to show a cool damage number. So here when I did the Nuke E, which wasn't necessary, but I felt like it, I did, yeah, 635k. So obviously you can get bigger damage numbers with her signature, you know, better buffs, could change my team, change my artifacts, crit fish, whatever, but it's not, it's just, I don't know, it's satisfying to see. Okay, I wanted to include that number, and if future me wants to include a bigger one, I would edit it in here, but if not, yeah, that was just one run I did without really preparing too much, and I cleared it very, very fast with Zibai and Linnea, getting a satisfying nuke in as well. Now with the showcase out of the way, here are my early thoughts on Linnea, how good she is, and her place in the meta. While it is still early, like this is just from my early access testing, so stay tuned for her release where things may change. As of right now, it does seem like Linnea is a very strong sub DPS and support. Linnea is insane because she provides you with so many different things in one unit. She has really good damage, either consistently through her tap skill or as a nuke if you spam it. Good res shred for Geo, either 15 or 30% in Ascendant Gleam, which will increase her damage and her Geo teammates damage as well, while also giving you good healing from her burst, as well as an EM buff to either a moon sign DPS like Zibai or to herself otherwise. She therefore has a lot of stuff compacted into one character that makes her very valuable, particularly for Geo teams. So while Linnea is definitely not for everyone, and we're going to cover this now, where she does shine is for Geo teams in particular, and especially Zibai. Now, Zibai, even before Linnea's release, right, as of the current patch, before Linnea comes out, is a really strong carry, definitely a top tier one, who has different pros and cons to the other Nodcry carries, namely Nefer and Flynn's, and in her own way is very strong, and in the upper echelon, the top tier of DPSs. She's a character that doesn't have a dedicated 5-star support, unlike the other two, but has a dedicated 4-star one, namely Illawa, who gets a lot better with constellations, and Zibai's performance, especially with a constellated Illawa, is very strong, and without it, she does have some solid, more budget-friendly team options as well. Zibai's strongest team is also, as I said, very strong, without being like straight up number one, but still not far off, and making her a top tier carry. Now, Linnea comes and changes that. In fact, Linnea raises the meta power level by creating effectively the new best team as far as current testing and early math shows, in a way that definitely just makes Zibai's premium team the strongest one right now. This is because while Zibai didn't have a dedicated 5-star support for her, now she has a character that she doesn't depend on. I don't think Zibai relies on Linnea or needs her, and as I said, even without her, she is really strong, but Linnea just raises the power level of her team by a considerable amount, making it seemingly the current strongest one, alongside Columbina and a last slot that we'll get into. Now, in these Zibai teams, Linnea is going to be a big upgrade, depending on what other Geo character you're using instead, but regardless, she's always going to be an upgrade, and on top of just Zibai, she's also a big upgrade and buff to other older Geo units. A Geo carry like Navia, who's always been pretty decent, now is much stronger with Linnea in her team, and older, more forgotten carries also get a notable power level buff, making them much more viable. This includes characters like Ito, and even 4-stars like Noelle or Ningguang. While Linnea will do a big chunk of the team's damage from off-field, she also will buff your carry's damage, enable Lunar Crystallize, and will elevate your team from okay to actually surprisingly good. Linnea also synergizes really well in these teams and just in general with Columbina, so if you have her, using them together will give you a lot of value and can help make any existing Geo unit stronger. stronger, including even just some teams with Geo supports, focusing around Lunar Crystallize with Linnea and Columbina. Additionally, I want to add here that for Zibai's premium team, the last and best thought is going to be a C6 Illua. Now, getting constellations on a 4-star character is luck dependent and can be very frustrating. Trust me, I know this as a Xiao main. Farazan was the bane of my existence. But if you manage to get C6 Illua, then the Zibai premium team with a C6 Illua, Columbina, and Linnea will seemingly be the strongest team as of right now. Now, while C6 Illua is really good, and I recommend using it if you have it, if you don't, the gap between C6 Illua and the second best option may not be as big as you think, because while there is a difference, C6 Goro actually, who yes is a C6 4-star character, but is an older one that you may have, actually performs really well in this team too, especially because the Ascendant Gleam Resonance, the buff that you get from it can only be triggered by a non-moon sign character, which means that Goro can trigger it, whereas without him, you don't get this buff, so you do lose out on some damage that Goro will instead give you to help make the gap between him and Illua not as big as it otherwise would be, because in the Illua team you have 4 moon sign units, meaning that you're losing out on a little bit of lunar reaction damage bonus, so that's just something that can help. Outside of that, even C2 Illua, or technically C0, can work as well, so it's not like you absolutely need a C6 4-star, but it does definitely help, so I did want to point that out here before we move on, even though this is a video about Linnea. Obviously, Zibai is like the main carry you're gonna play her with. Now, what does that mean, and what are my thoughts on her overall, and should you get her? Well, as I said, she, first of all, will make a bunch of older Geo carries much stronger and more able to clear the endgame content. So if you're a fan of Geo, have Geo carries on your account that you want to use, or want to build Geo teams, or even just lunar crystallized ones, then Linnea is definitely a great option for you. Secondly, for Zibai in particular, Linnea is pretty insane and will raise that team's power level, being a big upgrade to your Zibai team, somewhat similarly to Columbina, but in different ways, and will raise the meta power level of the best team, which Linnea is now a part of, once again, through the early testing and math that has been done. Additionally, Linnea is also usable in some other teams, either in some generic double Geo stuff, or with Columbina, Lunar Crystallize, or as a last slot in some teams with lunar carries, like Nefer, where she won't be as strong as Sucrose in the last slot, but can be a comfy healer and isn't too far behind, meaning that while you should not pull Linnea to play her in a Nefer team, like she's not worth the primos there, she is a viable option, meaning that if you want to get her for other reasons, you can use her in maybe a bit more teams than you might expect, with her main appeal obviously being Geo carries. And so overall, my thoughts on Linnea are mostly positive, but also a little mixed. Like, I do really like that she elevates a lot of older Geo units, brings them back to relevancy, and makes them much stronger and much more viable. I think that's genuinely really cool. However, what I like a bit less is that obviously she's a dedicated 5-star you need to pull for them, but beyond just that, I do think that raising Zibai's power level is a bit not necessary. Like, she was already a top tier DPS, and raising the best team's power level is not something that I really am a fan of, as I worry about the power level increasing too fast. And beyond that, I think Linnea in particular is an excellent unit and is a bit more versatile than you might expect, although obviously she's mainly for, Geo teams and to some extent lunar teams, particularly Lunar Crystallized, but can be a last slot with, as I said, Nefer or even Flynn's. But she is another example of a support that's released for a specific element or archetype. She's not like a Kazuha that back in the day you'd pull for basically any team. She's another example of a new trend where if you want to play Freeze, let's say, right, you would want to pull Escoffier alongside your cryo carry like Skirk, Lauma for Lunar Bloom alongside your carry like Nefer, and ideally you'd get Columbina as well. And the same can be said about many different archetypes and elements now, like Sitlali for Melt, Inefa for Lunar Charge, and the list goes on. And there's even some 4-stars like Chevy that accomplish this for a specific archetype. And Linnea is kind of like the dedicated buffer and sub DPS for Geo carries and Geo teams. And so this makes it to where, while she is good in even some teams where she kind of doesn't belong just because she does a lot of damage, her main use case and her highest pull value, when I think she's a arguably broken, like really strong unit and powerful addition to the meta, is going to be alongside either Zibai or any Geo carry or Geo team that you want to play. If that's what you want, then I highly recommend getting Linnea. Whereas if not, she is still solid. She's good because she gives you a lot of different things like healing and good damage and Geo Res Shred, but won't be as high pull value. She is a part of the new meta team, so she's obviously really strong, but as I said, you might not need her if you don't want to play Zibai or Geo carries in general, so keep that in mind and evaluate whether or not she's worth it for you based on the teams you're playing. And so yeah, overall, like, I really like some parts of Linnea's kit, I guess, that she really elevates a lot of Geo teams, but I do dislike that she raises the power level and makes Zibai's team just straight up, at C0 and under realistic assumptions, the strongest, biased. I don't like the power level increasing trend, and also that she's tied to a specific type of element. Although again, she does have some other teams she can be played, and at least she's not as restrictive in her passives. Like, she doesn't say, if you aren't only running Geo and Hydro, just don't get my res shred or lose a big chunk of it. And I do find her nuke skill super satisfying. The character has grown on me. I do quite like her, but there are also some other parts that I'm not the biggest fan of, as I am wary of power level increasing too rapidly in coming patches, as it has been a trend as of late. And so yeah, overall, those are my thoughts on Linnea. There's some nuance, but for the most part, I think she's cute and very fun, and I like that she buffs Geo characters, although I don't think Zibai needed to be stronger, but I also really like her, so, you know, it is what it is, I guess. But yeah, I have, you know, nuanced feelings on that I talked about earlier, but for the most part, I think Linnea is cute, and I like her pet, and I think she's very strong if you want to play Zibai or, you know, the specific teams she works in. So be smart with your primos, don't feel forced to spend or pull, but if you want her and like her, she can be strong, especially for Zibai and Geo teams. Very strong for those teams for that matter. And so yeah, again, I want to give you guys a reminder that there will be a complete Linnea guide for a bit after her release, so stay tuned for that and subscribe if you want to catch it as it comes out. This was just the early video on the creator experience server, so again, everything's subject to change, and I'm really grateful that I got to play Linnea before she came out on this server. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.